Welcome to Hope Through the Hard, a curated coalition podcast where we talk honestly about life struggles and how to face them in healthy, hope-filled ways. In 2 Corinthians 4, Paul says, "We are hard-pressed on every side, but not crushed, perplexed, but not in despair, persecuted, but not abandoned, struck down, but not destroyed." That's the purpose of this space. Real conversations about the hard things in life and the hope that carries us through. Visit curatedcoalition.com to find our coaching services and book a free consultation.
Hi, I'm Levi. This is Ashley. And Lincoln's doing our production part of this episode today. And we'll start with a kid question. What is the scariest thing that you have ever seen or heard?
Okay. Scariest thing you've ever seen?
Yeah, go ahead.
Spook light.
The spook light. Yeah.
Spook light.
It's kind of what I was going to say, but then I really wasn't scared. It was just like, oh, that's cool.
I was most assuredly scared. So do we want to explain what the spook light is in 30 seconds or less?
Go for it.
It's like a ball of light that floats and moves, and it's in a field in Nowheresville, Missouri.
Correct.
Where in Missouri? Like
in the middle of nowhere on a dirt road.
Yes.
In Missouri.
And so the college that we went to, it was like the fun thing to go see.
Yep.
And I was terrified when I saw it.
Well, and I grew up that area, so I went there multiple times.
I was never going back.
So the thing floats and goes over you, can vibrate your car.
One and done for me.
Goes in and out. Yeah.
Okay.
All zigzagging around. So that's
which actually goes really well with what we're talking about today.
Correct.
So we are talking about, we're launching a multi-part series. So when we look at our world today, we often wonder, where did all of the brokenness come from? Where did all the darkness come from? And we've spent a lot of time the last several episodes talking about stories where we were able to find hope, but we have not really fleshed out where the hard comes from. And so today is the first in a multi-part series where we are doing our best to uncover who the enemy is, so that you are able to see him for who he is and then fight him appropriately.
Correct.
So the first time I ever really realized that we lived in a supernatural world, I was in high school, and a child that I had met on a mission trip to Mexico was, unbeknownst to me, a child with generational ties to the occult. And after he gave his life to Christ, the enemy started physically attacking him. And he was seeing things in corners that weren't there. He was using language that he had never previously used. It was a horrific situation for him. And in his kindness, the Lord took him out of this world and into heaven, so that the enemy couldn't hurt him anymore. And a leader in our church had to really explain to me that he was being attacked by supernatural forces that were going to quite literally kill him if God didn't take him home. So that was the first time that I was really exposed to the supernatural.
Yeah. And this is something that, going to Bible college, brand new Christian, trying to understand and learn what I was trying to learn in the Old Testament class. Freshman year, but 4 years of Bible college and 2 years in a master's degree at a Bible college. And yeah, the spiritual part of spiritual warfare and angels, demons, all this stuff was never something I remember us ever talking about or how to even explain it. And yes, maybe we talked a little bit about it because I'm sure we did of some level in the Old Testament history. But I'm also sitting there trying to learn, there's how many books in the Bible?
Yeah.
And how many's in the New Testament, Old Testament?
Yeah.
And then now you want me to memorize them, spell them correctly? Yeah. And so there's so much that's involved in this that the church really just does not explain.
At all. They don't explain it. And so they most assuredly don't tell us how to fight it.
Correct.
So I feel like we live in this post-enlightenment society where we focus only on the things that we can see, hear, smell, taste, and touch. And we don't ever get into what in the world is going on in the supernatural world around us. And so, however, Genesis chapter 6, I think, is where we're going to spend a little bit of time today. And it gives us the answer to that question that you probably have never heard in Sunday school.
No.
Like never.
Nope.
So, and just to be very clear, we do not in any way consider ourselves anything other than students of this topic. And that is what we feel like God has called us to do, is just to explain to you all what he has been teaching us. And so we are relying very heavily on the works of people who are experts in this topic, specifically Dr. Joel Muddamalle and Dr. Michael Heiser, the late Dr. Michael Heiser. And Dr. Heiser wrote The Unseen Realm, which has been kind of at the forefront of this fringe-ish, unenlightened, spiritual, supernatural teaching or way of looking at the Bible for many, many years. And so that is sort of who we are relying on, those two theologians, those two teachers, where we're kind of pulling our information from.
Yep. And so we'll go ahead and jump into Genesis chapter 6, 1 through 4. When man began to multiply on the face of the land, and the daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of man were attractive, and they took as their wives any they chose. Then the Lord said, My spirit shall not abide in man forever, for he is flesh. His days shall be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterwards, when the sons of God came in to the daughters of man, and they bore children to them. These were the mighty men who were of old, the men of renown.
Okay, and so I think the thing that is repeated in that section is the sons of God. And Dr. Heiser's teaching specifically says that that phrase, the sons of God, is translated sons of God from Hebrew as B'nai Elohim. And so those are, in every instance in the Bible, divine beings, created members of God's heavenly host. Those are not human beings. So often when I read my study Bible, when I look at commentary, that tells us, oh, sons of God, it's just talking about the sons of Seth. That is not what the Hebrew says. It says B'nai Elohim, and every single time that is mentioned, it is referring to divine beings that are part of God's heavenly host. So these are, one other person who I love to listen to, Timothy Alberino, calls them the elder race. So part of the family of God, cosmic supernatural beings, we also can call them angels, but another name for them would just be the elder race. So the race of beings who was in the heavenly host before humans were created. So Dr. Heiser also says the Nephilim story is not a story about bloodlines. It's about spiritual warfare, which is what we wanted to talk about specifically. So the Nephilim story is an attempt by those supernatural beings, those B'nai Elohim, to oppose and undermine God's plan for humanity. So that began, that plan to take from or to divert God's plan began in the Garden of Eden. And it was when the serpent realized that Adam and Eve were being placed into the family of God, and that the other sons of God, the other B'nai Elohim, wanted the dominion of earth that God was giving to Adam.
Right. And we understand that here's the 66 books that are in the Bible, and what we see all the time, and what we are kind of referencing more into detail is the book of Enoch. And so in the book of Enoch, it fleshes out exactly what they're talking about at the Nephilim, and with that, how dangerous to humanity it really is, and what's taking place. So being aware of some books that this one's not in the canon, the book of Enoch, but it's a great book that shows a lot of great stories of giving some reference to of what they're talking about. And then also all the Bible times, New Testament, Old Testament, refer back to it and quote it and talk about Enoch and the importance of his. So the first book within the book of Enoch, the Watchers, is talking about how the sons of God came down onto Mount Hermon and taking their daughters and the men and making giants. And which is kind of like, oh, that kind of puts some stuff together whenever you start reading Giant and David and all these other stories. It's like, why did God make giants and how that takes place? Right. And how did that happen? And so why do we not have giants now? And what does that look like? And so here's the stories of kind of the situation of that.
Yeah. So do you want to keep reading in Genesis?
Yep.
Chapter 6?
Gotta love Genesis 6. 5 through 7.
Yes.
The Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in all the earth, and that every intention of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And the Lord regretted that he had made man on the earth, and it is grieving him to his heart. So the Lord said, I will blot out man, whom I have created from the face of the land, man and animals and creepy things and birds of the heavens, for I am sorry that I have made them. Wow.
Yeah.
End of story.
Not the end of the story, thank goodness.
Could have been.
Yeah, but that specifically deals with the proliferation of sin and the depravity of human nature. So sin grieves God's heart.
Yeah.
When we sin, it breaks his heart. And because he is righteous, our sin and his righteousness can't coexist. They can't be together. And so that's what was happening in that little section. These hybrid offspring, these Nephilim, the offspring that occurred when the sons of God, the B'nai Elohim, came down on Mount Hermon and took the daughters of men and impregnated them. Those children that those women bore were called the Nephilim, and they were that giant that it was talking about in Genesis 6:4. Those people, those giants, the Nephilim, were leading people to sin, and that grieved God's heart. And so essentially in verses 5 through 7, those B'nai Elohim are hoping that they can use their sons, the Nephilim, to be their proxy here on earth and to take away the dominion that God gave to Adam and Eve so that they could then reign here on earth instead of humanity. So Heiser specifically says the depravity of humanity was accelerated by the transgression of the sons of God. Their presence here on earth resulted in widespread wickedness and violence.
Yeah.
So
as a Christian, if someone was asked why the world is so dark, the answer is probably yours and mine it goes back to the fall. And with what just took place of God's heart broke when Adam and Eve sinned. The sin came in, and then here in this spot, the world is corrupt, and God's heart breaks. Yeah.
So the difference that I think Michael Heiser brings into that theology is that he says, yes, of course that is true, but he also says that there were two other rebellions that are significant. And when you look at them, and when you really look at the Hebrew and you seek to understand it, it really expands our context of spiritual warfare and what we're really fighting. So the first one of those is, of course, Genesis 3 and the fall. And that one's easy to understand. We can see very easily how that's a supernatural event, because when is the last time your dog talked to you? Like never, right? Like unless you're Cinderella and you're in a Disney movie, you don't go outside and have a little bird sit on your shoulder and have a conversation with you, and mice don't sing songs and dress you. Like that is not reality. And so that should be when we hear a serpent coming down the tree and talking to Eve in the garden, that should like be a little light that goes off in our head that says, no, this is not a natural event. This is a supernatural event those sons of God, the B'nai Elohim, are up to something. So there is a rebel in the divine council. So those heavenly beings are starting to rebel. That's Genesis 3.
Yeah. So, and then Genesis 6, the son of God and daughters of men, talks about, again, Peter and Jude both talk about the book of Enoch and what takes place in that. So I want to read 2 Peter 2, verse 4. For if God did not spare angels when they sinned, but cast them into hell and committed them to chains of gloomy darkness to keep until the judgment. That's crazy. So we read this and we see sons of God of God drew off this part and cut them out. And the judgment's onto them of what's taking place, of what they chose to do against God, which also breaks his heart, right? And then in Jude as well, Jude 6, and the angels who did not stay within their own position of authority, but left their proper dwelling, he has kept in eternal chains under gloomy darkness until the judgment of the great day. So it's crazy to see the transformation of what sin has done and the boundaries that have been put on heaven and earth and with the sons of God.
Yeah, those two references specifically are talking about what happened in Genesis 6.
Right.
That the angels, the B'nai Elohim, crossed the boundary and came down into our realm, our earthly realm, from the heavenly realms. And I think it's also really important. We see that in other cultures, in other cultural stories, specifically cultural stories from Mesopotamia, Rome, Greece, Babylon. And so they're not just in the apocryphal literature like the Book of Enoch, but we see them as stories like Gilgamesh, Hercules, all of those sorts of stories. We see this kind of parallel and this theme. So does that mean that those stories are based in fact?
It's crazy what all is in movies, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, like there is potential that those could have been based, those stories, those myths that we hear, we sort of see that here in the Bible and in the apocryphal literature that referenced by Peter and Jude.
Correct.
Yeah. So that was the second. So Genesis 3, Genesis 6, and then the third rebellion.
Oh, the fun one.
Is Genesis 11. Yeah. So this is often not seen as a supernatural rebellion.
No, it's not.
And so the Genesis 11 is the Tower of Babel.
Correct.
And most people, when you read the story of the Tower of Babel, just assume that that is humans seeking to gain knowledge and try to make something of themselves. That kind of shifts in light of Deuteronomy 32:8. And so I'm going to read Deuteronomy 32:8. And it says, when the Most High gave the nations their inheritance, when he divided mankind, he fixed the borders of the people according to the number of the sons of God. Oh, there that is again, the B'nai Elohim, the sons of God. So let me read that again. So when the Most High, God, gave the nations their inheritance, when he divided mankind, that's specifically referring to the Tower of Babel, Genesis 11. When he did that, he fixed the borders of the people according to the number of the sons of God, which means that he divided the people and they were punished.
Yeah.
They rebelled. They were trying to attain something when they built that tower that they weren't supposed to be doing.
Right.
Their hearts were evil in that. And so as a punishment, this is a mind boggler, as a punishment, he set them under one of those B'nai Elohim. So there was a son of God, a B'nai Elohim, that would have ruled each geopolitical area of the time. So Babylon had a B'nai Elohim, a son of God, that was linked to it. Rome would have had a B'nai Elohim, a son of God, that was linked to it, as would have Greece, Medo-Persia. All of these different areas would have had a son of God that they were under as a punishment for their rebellion in Genesis 11 at the Tower of Babel. Wow. Does that make sense?
Yeah, not whenever you compare it to the Sunday school answer of they built a tower to reach up to God, and then God just spread them out and made them talk different languages.
Made them speak a different language, right? Yeah. And so then the question becomes, well, what about Israel?
Right.
Right? So, and that's the beautiful thing. So the thing about Israel is that they were given to God. He pulled them away and he sought out Abraham, who was not yet Abraham, and Sarah, who was still Sarai, who was childless. And he said, okay, wait, these are the perfect people for me to start again with.
Right.
And so he again planned a way to kind of start culture over again with a new Adam and Eve, essentially. So Abraham and Sarah are a parallel to Adam and Eve. They were childless, and so he could start with a supernatural event and give them children. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay, so Israel was under him. It was the nation that was not just given to a son of God, but it was given to God himself. And those other nations were fragmented, and that is the reason why idolatry became rampant. Yeah. Because each one of those nations was then worshiping their B'nai Elohim. Right. Okay, so all of that, where each nation has its own son of God, is called cosmic geography. That is what Joel Muddamalle and Dr. Michael Heiser both call cosmic geography. And it just means that a supernatural being is attached to a geopolitical area. Yeah. Does that are you tracking so far? Does it make sense?
Well, yeah,
Okay.
I'm tracking.
I know you're tracking, but
are they tracking? That's the fun question,
Yeah.
because this is not something that's just typically talked about. It is, how do all these other gods happen? And well, here's the tie to it. Mm-hmm. Where do we get all these myths? It's tied back to this, and here's why. And we don't explain that. The church doesn't dive into it. A little bit into Pharaoh and their gods with the plagues.
Right.
But beyond that,
yeah, you're really exactly right.
We don't get into these different regions and stuff. So with that, how does this help tie into a little bit with the New Testament? Because this sounds old, but now it's new, which then continues into today.
Right. So I think that the easiest way to explain this is that in the book of Luke, Jesus sends out 72 apostles, and they are to go, specifically says in Luke, they're to go to the nations, and that is a symbolic reference that Jesus sent those apostles out to the 72 nations that they were divided into at the Tower of Babel. And so we then see that again, we see kind of the pulling back in of these other nations at Pentecost, when the Holy Spirit comes and each person at Pentecost goes out and they go out into the nations again. And so they're going out to the nations that are under the cosmic power of darkness, the geopolitical rulership of the fallen angels. Yeah. So.
Yeah. And so with that, what's some of the fear of, what does a principality and power fear? The big part of this is the church actually doing what the church is supposed to be doing. Mm-hmm. If the church was really teaching some of this and teaching what's taking place and how to combat the spiritual warfare that we're in today. Mm-hmm. And then what to do to combat it. Well, part of that is to reach our main goals, the Great Commission, go tell all the world about Jesus. Mm-hmm. And then the next part of that's having unity together. But we're not really taught a lot of that, of what to do in this spiritual warfare. We're just taught to, know Jesus and be nice and loving to people. But here's this other part of everyday life of a spiritual warfare where we're getting attacked. And why we're getting attacked is because this is what we're supposed to do, go tell people, and this other side, this dark side, is against us. Mm-hmm. and fighting us, distracting us with everything it possibly can, disturbing the church, making it to where we don't have unity in the church. And so it is fighting us. Why do I feel like I'm having a hard time? and struggling each and every single day, it's because I'm being attacked.
Yeah.
And we don't talk about it. It's just like, oh, it's just a bad day, or, oh, it's karma for this or that, or it's just life.
Or it's just, oh, my kids are being naughty, right. Or, oh, my car broke down, or my fan in my bathroom quit working, or whatever.
Yeah.
It's not.
Yeah.
It's not.
It's not, because we are in a spiritual fight. There are demons around that are fighting us to distract us, to keep us away from having joy, peace, and patience, and doing everything it possibly can. The thoughts that come into our head all of a sudden are thoughts that are coming from something else to make us be distracted and to not focus on what God's love really is and what we're supposed to do.
Which is bring the nations in.
Correct.
We are to fulfill the Great Commission.
Correct.
And so Dr. Joel Muddamalle says spiritual warfare is not an abstract, symbolic thing. It's a very real conflict with an enemy that wants to destroy what God has called good. Yep. That includes us as human beings, marriage, family, the church, anything that God calls good. You can bank on those spiritual forces of evil really trying to destroy. Dr. Heiser says, from a quote from the Unseen Realm, the Old Testament is a record of God's conflict with and victory over hostile divine powers who seek to corrupt humanity and oppose his purposes. And when you see the Old Testament like that, you recognize what Paul is talking about in Ephesians chapter 6, verse 12, when he talks about we're not fighting each other. We're fighting much bigger things. And so that is actually what we're going to kind of dive into next week is Ephesians 6:12, the war that we can't see. Right. And we're going to expand on the idea that we are in a real spiritual battle, and it's not against our husband or our kids or our neighbors. It's much deeper. Much deeper.
And the big thing of this, start praying. As you dive into these types of things, you're going to be attacked. And Satan is going to come after you because he doesn't like you getting on his turf, and he wants control, and he wants power, and he wants to destroy us.
And he's very happy with this whole sons of Seth thing where we don't recognize, right, where we've been hoodwinked essentially into believing that we aren't in a spiritual battle.
Yeah. And we are every single day. And so start praying for yourself, for everybody around, and start diving into the word, because God has a job for us, and he understands how powerful both sides can be, especially if we as a church, just step up to the podium and say, yes, I'm here to fight and I'm ready to play.
Yeah.
And let's go.
Thanks for joining us for today's conversation. My hope is that you leave here reminded that whatever you're facing, you're not crushed, abandoned, or destroyed. That's the promise of 2 Corinthians 4:8 and 9 and the heartbeat of hope through the hard. Visit curatedcoalition.com for all of our coaching services or to book your free consultation. We'll see you next time.